Welcome to NeoCon 2023 CEU session, Return to Office Data and its Impact on the Office, from Floor Plans to Furniture. Presenting is Nellie Hayat, Julia Calabrese, and Janet Pogue. As a reminder, to gain CEU credit, attendees must be reported as logged in for 60 minutes and complete the 10-question quiz via the Take Quiz button once the session is ended.
Hi, my name is Nellie Hayat. I'm the Workplace Innovation Lead at Density. My role is as much forward thinking as past diving, but basically with Density, we're able to draw from our data and come back with insight that can tell us how the future of work will look like and what the office of the future will be designed. So that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Janet Pogue McLaurin. I'm a principal at Gensler based in Washington, D.C., and I'm the Global Director of Workplace Research, which is part of Gensler's Research Institute.
I'm Julia Calabrese. I'm the Global Design and Brand Manager for Ford Motor Company's Built Environment Studio. We sit within Ford Motor Company.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Really excited to have you join this incredible session with Janet from Gensler and Julia from Ford. So the three of us will look at the return to office data that we collected either from technology, from employee sentiment survey, or from observation, and how it's translated into the office and the impact it has on designing offices for the future. So to kick things off, I want to present briefly. Janet and Julia will be with us, and each of them will give you more of what they do and their role at each of the company. But Janet will be talking about the survey they run at Gensler, and Julia will tell us about what they've observed at Ford. And I'll be talking on behalf of Density and the data we collected from our network of clients. So briefly, table of contents, just as mentioned, Gensler's first, then Density, and then Ford. And the three of us will also run a use case that you see how it developed from what people say to what they actually do and what it actually means in the context of the post-pandemic world. Janet, the floor is yours.
Hello there. Thank you. So again, I'm Janet Pogue McLaurin, and I'm a principal at Gensler based in Washington, D.C. I'm the Global Director of Workplace Research, which is part of Gensler Research Institute working across our firm. And as Nellie said, I'm going to share some highlights of what we're learning from our latest U.S. workplace survey. And so I'm going to be sharing what office workers are actually telling us. And Nellie's going to share how they're understanding employees actually behave. And then Julia is going to share what she sees in practice. So we're hoping this is going to tie together in a really positive way. So Gensler has been actually studying the workplace since 2005, when we first linked design and performance. And in 2017, how to measure a great workplace experience. And right before the pandemic, we saw a significant decline in both effectiveness and experience. The workplace was ripe for reinvention because something was not working. And then the pandemic hit. And it accelerated what wasn't working already. And as we continue to respond to hybrid work, we're measuring shifts in how we work, the role of the office, and even our expectations of the workplace as well. And in 2018, we identified 5 work modes that we've been studying ever since. So first, there's working alone that includes a wide variety of different kind of work activities, some of which require deep focus, some are just a light touch of concentration. Working with others in person, as well as working with others virtually. And then learning and professional development, which includes mentoring and coaching. And finally, socializing, which is all about building social capital through connecting and networking. And if you stop and think about it, this socialization is really what builds trust that eventually fosters innovation. And we have been looking at how people actually spend their time in a typical work week and how that's shifted over time. And we've measured this by each of these 5 work modes. And up until the pandemic, at least in the US, we spent about half of our time working alone. And we now see coming out of the pandemic that is a reduction to about a third of a typical work. And since the pandemic, we've seen learning and socializing, it's more than doubled. It's gone from 5% to 12% for both of those different work modes. And we still spend, the vast majority of our time working alone, but it's really dropped significantly. But working with others, both in person and virtually, that's returned to pre-pandemic levels. And this is looking at how we spend our time, irregardless of where we're actually working. So we've also been measuring where people are working. And in the US, employees are reporting that they're spending about 51%, a little over half of a typical work week at the office at the time of the survey. And this was very consistent with what Castle was even measuring as part of their Back to the Office barometer. But it's interesting to see that only 21% is actually working at home. So it's no longer I'm either at the office or I'm working from home. 23% is actually spent working in other locations. And we define this in a wide variety of ways in the survey, but we included alternate office space that is like other company locations, and especially for global organizations that may have company locations in a wide variety of places beyond their primary office space that is assigned or location that is assigned to it. We also see business travel, co-working sites, and third places. And we define third places in the survey as coffee shops, parks, libraries, and other third places. And so these third places could be close to home, or they actually may be closer to the office. So, we think about hybrid. And hybrid, as it relates back to the workplace, is a fairly new term. But U.S. employees have always been mobile, working both in and out of the office. So the concept of hybrid has been here for a long while. And the average time in the office that we have been measuring since 2016 has been about 80% of the week when we first started tracking it. And you can see that really has not changed, those red bars, over time, right up until the pandemic. And the most innovative, as we've been measuring innovation, which is the top quartile of 6-question kind of set that we averaged to an index score that was developed by FutureThink back in 2016, which really assesses a culture of innovation. So the most innovative, which is the top quartile of those 6 questions, we're actually spending less time working in the office, and it had been gradually decreasing to just 67% of the week right before the pandemic. And in the survey, we not only asked how much time respondents are currently in the office, but we also asked how much time do they feel like they ideally need to work in their company's office space to maximize their individual and team productivity. And this is where we got the first surprise in our data. This is what they actually told us, that people report that they need to spend more time at the office for their productivity. And we asked it both as an individual productivity and team productivity. And we got the same answer. They were within 1% apart, which was super fascinating. So the most innovative, they desire to work at the office even more than average. And it came right back for the US to that 67% of the week that we had measured pre-pandemic, which begged the question for us, why aren't employees coming in for their ideal? Like, what's holding them back? And we think part of the answer might be why they're returning and understanding what's working or not working back at the workplace. So throughout the pandemic, we conducted 11 different surveys. And this is what you see on the left column. The number one reason cited by employees to return to the office was working in person with my team and colleagues. And this was number one, regardless of country, by generation, by industry, or regardless of when we actually surveyed. And we did 6 different surveys in the United States over the course of the pandemic. Again, this was always the number one answer. But now, when we asked the question again in our latest survey, we saw to focus on my work is the new top reason to come into the office. And we don't mean to come in to focus. It means really to focus on my work, which is a little bit broader. And in fact, if you look at all the top reasons right after that, they're all work-focused activities like access to technology, scheduled meetings, access to specific spaces, materials, and resources. So think about this as I need to get into the office to get my work done. So we measured space effectiveness to support each of the 5 work modes on a 5-point scale. And this is looking at this pentagram as like starting to summarize what we saw in all 5 work modes. And so what we see is working with others in person, learning and socializing are the most effective in the office as people are starting to return. So the office works well for the very things that we needed the office to work for during the pandemic as the top reasons to return to the office. But what the office is not working well for is the least effective for working alone. Yet of all 5 work modes, we spend 34% of a typical work week working alone. And 69% of working alone requires a high degree or a high level of concentration. That's what we need to solve for. So as designers, as facility managers, as corporate real estate execs, we really need to stop and think about how are we going to provide access to private and quiet spaces to help employees do this high degree of concentration. So we found that the workplace is also less effective for working with others virtually. People spend on average about 14% of a typical work week working virtually. That yet, if you look at all the meetings that are held in the office, 57% are hybrid, meaning that they've got both people in the office that may be there in person, but they also have virtual participants that may be calling in. And this is prevalent whether you're a global organization like Ford, and I'll be interested to see what Julia, what she sees at Ford, that you've got different people at different locations, or whether they happen to be traveling or working from home that day. So we asked the question, what would bring employees back to the office? And so we asked it by asking from a standpoint of, if your company or organization provided your ideal work experience mix, would you be willing to come into the office more often? And we got another big surprise because in the US, 42% of respondents said they would come in 1 more day a week, and 24% said they would come back to the office full time. It was only 17% of the respondents that said there would be no change. So we know that this idea of this new mix of experiences is incredibly important. And that needs to support different types of spaces as well. And we know from all of our research from the very beginning, back in 2005, that it's essential to first provide a functional and effective space for employees to work. And then we have to overlay on that, how do we create a great work experience? And together, those 2 things, effectiveness and experience, they can work in tandem to positively impact outcomes that ultimately drive business performance. So we measured a number of those. We looked at both individual and team outcomes, and we looked at some organizational outcomes. And so when we compare high-performing workplaces, which are those red bars, and that's the top quartile in effectiveness and experience, to low-performing workplaces by the low bar, which is the bottom quartile, we start to see that high-performing workplaces positively impact every single outcome we measured. And so if you're looking at individual outcomes, it was things like personal health and well-being, career advancement, work-life balance, job satisfaction, even connection to your company. But we saw team outcomes too, like team productivity and relationships to coworkers. And we had 2 organizational outcomes, like the quality of your team's work and services, or even speed of decision making. And I think it's fascinating that working in the office actually positively impacted personal health and well-being and work-life balance by over double. And finally, we know that it impacts the need for the office. So this chart is illustrating the gap between current and ideal percentage of time. And so employees in high-performing workplaces actually report that they need to come into the office 30% more than they're currently coming in, indicated by the red bar on the far left, compared to those in low-performing workplaces, their desire to come into the office even less than they're currently coming in. And the same played out for the most innovative employees, the most engaged, the most committed to their organization, even those with the strongest team relationships, that the physical workplace matters more than ever for the high-performing workplaces and employees. And finally, employees, if there's a key takeaway, employees need the office to be a great place to get their work done, and the right mix of experiences will accelerate the return. So I'll hand it off to you, Nellie.
Thank you so much, Janet. And it's so fascinating to see what people say and how much they want the office, and working with our own clients in our network to really design high-performing workplaces, because as you say, people want it. People know that they would be better off by coming more often because they would benefit from it.
That's right. They not only want it, they need it, right?
Exactly. And so thankfully with our technology, with density technology, our customers are able to identify what's working, what's not working. And also sometimes we identify gaps between what employees say versus what do. So let's dive into this little tension, and also what are the best examples to create this high ROI workplace, a workplace that not only bring value to employees, but continue refueling their motivation to do great work and bringing in better business performance. So very much on what I just say, like there's a difference between designing on what a few people say and designing based on how people really use and behave in the space. And so with density technology, we're able to have larger set of data that workplace leaders can take on designing and refining their offering to their employees. And a very simple process that we use is defining the objectives, and then further down the line, coming up with the action that we should take in order to meet those objectives. And right in the middle will be the metric that we use and the tools that will be best to actually get the data. And so to give more simplicity to it, I decided to show 3 common objectives that many people can relate, especially our audience. One would be validate the space design. Like, do I have the right space? I know people want to come, and I know when they come, just as Janet say, they will benefit from it. Do I have the right space to meet their expectation? The second one, in the context of return to the office, like how do I create a seamless experience for people who want to come? And the third one is on a larger scale, how do I make sure that I have the right assets in the right location and the right amount of it with the right mix inside of it? So space design, something that Janet shared that really resonated with me was people are reporting that they have a difficult time finding space to focus. they have difficult finding time to focus, but also the right space to focus. And that was one example that we saw internally working with one of our clients, was this one. Like, I know I need to have time alone, and also I need to have time with my team, with more people. But where should I do it? So working with that particular customers, he looked at his current setup and he saw that there was a misalignment between wanting to meet others, wanting to work on its own, and also have like kind of like this space that we call other space that could be that could work for different function, but that also allow me to find my own belonging inside the office. And so working with density data, when we saw that misalignment, our customer decided to actually increase the number of space for collaboration. So make it more intentional that this space is set up for collaboration, and actually allowing more space and coming up with tools. So one of them were individual rooms that would be dedicated for focus time. And that came up again because there was a alignment between what people say and how they behave, and how the office can really fill the gap in between, and a fair created space for each of these experiences that people were craving for. That's showing the before and after, but very much like, again, like having the right mix is critical, and refining each time how much we should allocate for each type of space is a way to increase the ROI of the workplace. And so working with that customer really made it significant to show that the workplace can evolve and should evolve, and being in touch with what your employees need at all time is very much the solution. And so we're saying that being in touch with your employees should come from other surveys, should come from surveys actually, and from maybe data that are more anonymous, like sensor data, so you can see where you should put your focus on. The second objective I wanted to highlight was very much in the context of return to the office. How do we create that seamless experience? People have reported during this last year of experiment of return to the office that sometimes they want to come, but things are not easy. They don't know whether they should book an office, whether they should book their own attendance and tell a tool that they'll be coming in. How do they tell their team that they'll be coming in? And so that put a lot of stress on the workplace team, because they don't know how many people will come in. They don't know whether they should overstaff for a certain day or understaff for a certain day. They should know if they should beef up their cleaning or their vendors to meet that demand. And someday they actually have a strong support, but they don't need that much. And so with our data also, they've been able to look at, over the last period of time they decided to look at, is there a certain trend or pattern I can rely on to then build my forecasts and align my vendors into it. And so a very interesting study that we did, and that was looking at the whole range of customers we had, was what does the work will look like now? And a real aha moment was, oh, it looks like Monday is getting to the same utilization rate as Friday was. And so we call it Monday is the new Friday, but we see this midweek mountain really being enriched and nourished by actually 2 days of working outside of the office. It doesn't mean it's working from home. It means that people decided that the midweek mountain, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, are working really well. And this when the office is nourishing for whatever they want, whatever experience that they need. But actually Monday and Friday, it's not working so well. And so they prefer staying home or being somewhere else. And that information was really useful for many of our customers, because they were able to actually align again their costs and their support on different days of the week. And so Monday and Friday, you would have maybe more of a quiet day in the office. There will be maybe less interruption coming from vendors who have to clean up or who have to refuel your cafeteria, etc. Because actually maybe the few people who come on those days, they actually want the quietness. And whereas you have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which have more of a like a high intensity level. And so you need stronger support to create that seamless experience for employees and to have like a turnover of like people overusing the meeting room or the desk and allowing people to feel safe because they know that the space is being cleaned and fueled in the amenities that they need. And the last one, which is more of a larger scale, it's very much how workplace leaders now experiencing this challenge of like, I know people have relocated. How do I align my asset portfolio with where people are? We moved away from the model that we used pre-pandemic, which was I design an office and I bring people in by relocating talent to that new location, and more on how can I follow where the people live now? In the new sentiment that I've seen across employees, which was almost a 15-minute commute. Like, I don't want to travel so far for the office. Even when the office is really amazing, really traveling far to come might not be ideal. And so what we'd seen working with a particular client was there was a slowdown in one of their locations, and they had two big offices in Chicago, and they saw that one location didn't have as much attendees as the other, and by looking at the data, we were able to see that creating a coalition in just one was actually creating more excitement, and then actually it brought even more people than before, just because it felt easier to have everything under one roof. People felt like they would come and they would meet more people, and then suddenly there was more offering in that same location. And so for that example, it was the right solution to actually dismantle one location and keep just one out in Chicago to really create that critical mass that people were looking for. And again, it didn't mean that the entire week was really high energy, because people also needed time and space to focus, but just it made it easier to know where is my home in Chicago whenever I come, if I'm traveling from afar or if I commute into the office. And personally, I'm always very excited to see the gap between what people say and what they do. And really working hand in hand with clients to understand, like, is there any context to it? And this is why I was very excited to bring in Julia from Ford to have this idea of like, can you give me more context on, like, I know people want to come more often. I know if we find the right mix, people will come more often. But when they come, do they behave in a certain way? So the floor is yours now, Julia.
Thanks, Nellie. I'm Julia Calabrese, the Global Design and Brand Manager for Workplace and Retail for Ford Motor Company. And at Ford, we have just surpassed our one-year rollout of our official return to the office. So today we have a really good body of knowledge to share on how we're collecting data, what are we seeing from our data, and then how we're applying that to what we call organizational resiliency. To first outline our return to work policy for those who may not be familiar, our policy actually differs quite a bit from a lot of other auto and tech companies that are out there that have started to put in place return to work policies. We understand that how we work will always be evolving, but we do expect to maintain a hybrid model for those jobs that are not site dependent going forward. We've empowered our leaders to customize their on-site collaboration strategies to achieve their distinct business goals and to help drive productivity via collaboration across teams. So to put that very simply, we empower our leaders to make smart choices. And we believe that it's a combination of policy and place that enables employees to do their best work. To be honest, though, we didn't always work this way. Prior to the pandemic, we operated much differently. We actually didn't have a work from home policy because we just weren't really set up for it. But in addition to the demands of the world in the wake of the pandemic, we've also had the recent entry of our EV or electric vehicle business. And with this new market segment, we have been challenged by our leadership to work in new and innovative ways to deliver new and innovative products. So as a 119-year-old global business, you might be wondering, how do we adapt and stay agile to unforeseen economic conditions and shifting business needs? What we're seeing as the key is to strive for organizational systemic resiliency, or really the ability to anticipate and persevere through change. So today I'm going to walk you through what our data collection methods are, what we're seeing in our data, and then look at a real use case scenario from one of our active projects. At Ford, we view data as one piece to a larger equation. By utilizing a combination of research methodologies, we're able to bridge the now and the far. When we approach what we call a big wicked problem, like the future of work, we use primary research involving qualitative and quantitative methods to understand data that gives us insight into the now, what's actively happening in our facilities with our employees day to day, month to month, year to year, even for a specific period of time. And this is internal to Ford. This can sometimes be a little bit challenging. We have a lot of user groups that send out surveys across Ford wanting to get feedback on a variety of things. From if you drive a Ford, we'd love to hear about it. Our HR team sends out pulse surveys. And so getting the attention of employees can sometimes be challenging, and we recognize that challenge. In the wake of the pandemic, it was also very hard to understand the data that we were getting because there's a lot of things that were going on during that time. So, for example, when we surveyed employees early on, we saw a really high percentage of people that wanted to continue to work from home. As the pandemic went on, that number changed. And of course, we're all going through it in the wake of the pandemic. So we can understand that we're going to get some variability. So surveying and getting feedback from employees for a long period of time was very important so that we could make sure that we had a good insight into how employees were feeling over the course of the years. We also then use secondary research to help validate our primary research finding. And these are often articles that come from trusted partners like Gensler, Steelcase, Gallup, and other industry experts. This helps round out our data, sometimes known as benchmarking. In addition to those common research methodologies, we also apply a layer of what we call human science. And this really rounds out our approach to research-led design. As humans, we're organic in nature, and the data that we collect through sensors and other surveys can only give us a small piece of the story. So we also take a look at human behavior through the lenses of neurology, psychology, and anthropology to help us determine the why behind what we're seeing in the data. This can help give us insights into the behaviors, the trends, the expectations, and some of the nuances behind why employees behave the way that they do. So earlier this year, we got a task from our leadership. What we were hearing from employees as we launched what we call our collaboration centers was a handful of buildings where employees could utilize as a resource. If you needed to come in to collaborate, they knew that they had a certain number of buildings that they could go in and do that. They could book the space online. If you needed to do focus work, we had a booking tool to book a desk and had things that were available in advance and in the moment in order to support a wide range of needs. And so what we were hearing initially from employees is that they were coming on site to collaborate. They were coming on site to do the work that they couldn't do from home, which made perfect sense. But earlier this year, when we wanted to proactively look at our data and make sure that for projects upcoming, that we're getting ready to purchase furniture or getting ready to go through the design phase, that we had a really good understanding of what's happening right now. And so when we looked at the data, we actually saw something a little bit different than what we expected. We went into this thinking, maybe there's not a big need for desks in the future. If people are coming on site to collaborate, maybe we should readjust our me to we ratios or our focus work to collaborative work settings within the work floor. But the data showed us something different. So we're seeing a gradual increase in the amount of people that are coming on site to work. But we're also seeing a gradual increase in the percentage of time being spent on focus work. I think as Janet and Nellie both pointed out, that coming on site to do focus work is still really important. And so we definitely didn't want to take away those assets from our facilities. We needed to maintain a distribution of both in order for employees to do their best work. So this was really insightful for us and very important for us to take a look at as we progressed with our projects around the world. From this data and from our additional quantitative methods, as well as our human science, we started to pull out what we call pervasive themes. And I'll hit on a few. We pulled out 6. One of the big ones was collaboration areas as an anchor. And this was really indicating workflow efficiencies. What is the distribution of me to we? How can we use collaboration as a meeting point or an anchor to a group of people or a team that come in to work throughout the day? Another one was personalization. With the upward trend in on-site work, the concept of territoriality starts to become really prevalent. And we see this at a macro and a micro level. At a macro level, we're seeing a rise in the desire by groups to stake claim to an area. These are groups that are often coming in quite a bit to do collaborative work. And this manifests in wanting to put up posters or name the conference rooms or film the conference rooms. And we understand that it's really important for individuals to have a sense of place and to have a sense of identity in their workplace. So we definitely understand the rationalization here. We're also seeing that same thing come through at the micro level. People want the brands that they engage with and the places that they work to have a sense of identity. I want to be seen. I want to feel like I'm a part of the culture and the community here. So this is showing up in a really a breadth of applications here in our data. Also, the role in technology. I think Janet also hit on this as well. The need to have access to hybrid technologies or phygital technologies, things that can help bridge hybrid work, whether it's at home or in the office. The access to this technology is incredibly important to make sure that people, regardless of their location, can collaborate effectively. We then use these pervasive themes to create what we call affordances. And affordance is what the environment allows a user to do or feel in a way that the user can actively perceive. This is the summation of our data and what informs our space design, as Nellie mentioned, that validate the data and then apply it to the space. That's what our affordances are really set up to do. So we created a chart. We utilized key experience drivers in the realms of space, tools, process, and culture. And then we created a set of affordances to address the physical, the emotional, and the behavioral outputs that we see from employees within the workplace. So a couple of those pervasive themes that are coming forward: intuitive and approachable phygital technology. Some other ones: building trust and transparency. When you're working side by side with groups that you may not know and individuals that you've never seen before, creating trust is incredibly important. Also collaborative planning and strategy, creating a hosted experience. So all of these things filter into the physical output and manifestation of design. Going into a real world scenario, how we create organizational resiliency, a few key drivers here that contribute to resiliency. We ran an investigative design sprint to validate some furniture layouts that we have going into one of our biggest projects in Dearborn, which is called our Central Campus Building. Prior to COVID, we already had the steel going in the ground for this building. The plans for the facility were already completed. So now that we have this data and we have all of this knowledge, we needed to validate the furniture that we were going to purchase and put into the facility, making sure that it was going to set our employees up to do their best work. So a few things here: being mindful, acknowledging that everyone works differently, and providing adequate ratios of space to fulfill those needs. The next thing was underlying power and data infrastructure. even prior to COVID, we had been designing our facilities and our open workspaces on what we call a 6 foot by 6 foot module. And this is the standard footprint of a workstation, which can then be expanded upon to create an ecosystem of workplace tools, whether it's a meeting room and a couple focus rooms or a bank of 6 workstations. That takes up those two things take up the same footprint. And so when teams grow and flex over time, or they need more meeting space and less focused workspace, we can easily take out these typologies and replace them with whatever the employees need in order to work effectively. So this was already in place, and this was really the key to our resiliency. The other thing is flexible furniture. We put almost everything except for sofas and lounge chairs on casters. And this gives the team the flexibility, the autonomy to personalize their space. It gives them the agility to work differently. This mitigates them having to put in work orders and having facilities be incredibly involved in helping people set up their space. They have the autonomy to do that. We call it freedom within a framework. So anything that you have within your space, you have the autonomy to move it around and make it work for you. And so as we looked at our central campus building, we took a look at our floor plans, and we had 3 themes that kind of presented themselves as we were looking at our pervasive themes, our affordances, and our resiliency criteria. Those 3 were collaboration as an anchor, community table, and a hackable neighborhood. And we ended up moving forward with the hackable neighborhood. This just cranked up that level of flexibility and agility that happens. And you can start to see here from our pre-pandemic standard where me and we space were pretty evenly distributed across a work floor. There was a pretty solid rhythm that happened between me and we to what we're moving towards in the future, which we're calling our hackable neighborhood, which more distributes the me space to kind of the outer edges, ability to focus and creating a centralized space where teams can come together and flex the furniture as they need to in order to work effectively. So this is what we've seen as a great application of the data, the affordances, our pervasive themes, all comes together to create this hackable neighborhood, which we really believe will set us up well for longevity of the future. And the last key component really to resiliency is aligning all of that work on all of that data to the core ethos of a brand. Our strategies and solutions as designers really need to align with the why of any organization. And that's really what we've done here. Solve for our purpose by rooting our methodologies, our strategies, and our outcomes to our core components of people and planet. Back to Nellie.
Thank you so much, Julia and Janet. It was such an interesting dive into both of your context and organization. And I think we have time, so I would like to ask maybe one question to each of you. So, Julia, I hear that you observed a lot of behaviors and you put it into the context of like, it's a post-pandemic behavior that we brought in. So what was your biggest surprise, or what do you see changing as people settle back into a new routine and rhythm?
Yeah, I think one thing that our data kind of pointed out was the highest percentage of a space being used was actually the focus room. I think it was upwards of like 80% of the time a focus room was being used. And that's just the course of the day. If you looked at a focus room, it was occupied for about 84% of the time. And what we went on site and visually observed was that sometimes that 80% was being spent by 1 or 2 people. So people are seeking out spaces, perhaps that psychologically make them feel safe. As a post-pandemic behavior, I know I'm used to, I have 4 walls, a ceiling, and a door on my office at home. So when I go into the office, it's kind of this assumed new behavior as I'm looking for the same things that make me feel comfortable as what I have at home. And so we start to question, like, is that the case? Or are people used to listening to their calls on speakerphone? Maybe they don't have the right tools anymore to sit in an open office. So maybe that's something we need to take back to IT. So through the various data collection mechanisms and on-site observations, we start to see that play out, and we can really hone into like, why are those behaviors happening? So that's kind of what we're seeing so far.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love what you just said. Sometimes it's either a lack of tools or a lack of access to those tools. Like, do we need to provide more people with earphones, or do we need to educate people about the tools they can use? So thank you so much for sharing. I think a lot of people would relate to it. And Janet, I think to balance off of this, you had this beautiful graphic showing how the US was doing compared to other countries. So I would love to hear more about it. Like, are we setting up the trend, or are we lagging behind, or is it a mix of both?
So I'm glad you asked this question, because we actually have surveyed way beyond the US. We have 9 countries that we're getting ready to publish this report that I think by the beginning of NeoCon should be live on our website. But we've looked at a comparison across all these countries. And I should just mention, these respondents are not Gensler clients. It's an anonymous panel-based, statistically significant sampling for each country across the 10 industries that we're most interested in. And so we're able to do an apples to apples comparison. And what we're finding is there's more commonalities than unique differences. And the US does not necessarily lead as in the best practice and everything. In fact, we have a lot that we can learn from a number of the other countries. But as we're looking at, the return to the office in terms of current utilization and what people say they ideally need for their productivity, we're seeing almost identical percentages country to country. It is more universal. And that was a huge surprise to us as we're looking at the data. And so look for that report because we have really stepped back and look at all 9 countries in a way that will be some interesting comparative benchmarks.
Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing. I think it's all for all of us. Thank you again, Janet and Julia, for sharing so openly. And it's good. It's in the box. Thank you again so much for listening. I hope you found it as exciting as I was. Don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Nellie Hayat, or you can always go to Density and read our resources and reach out to me there. You should try my email. Thank you again.
And likewise, this is Janet Pogue McLaurin on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me any questions. And you can find all of our research at Gensler.com, not only the US, but even the global comparison or whatever countries you're most interested in.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on LinkedIn, Julia Calabrese. I'm happy to share further insights and collaborate on any methodology that you heard about today.
We hope you enjoyed the session. Before logging off, please complete the 10-question quiz via the Take Quiz button. Once submitted, your attendance will be reported and the CEU credit will be added within 45 days of completion. Thank you for joining us.